Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on today's webinar. My name is Dalal Bahidji, and I am one of the executive directors at the Bahrain Economic Development Board. I'm delighted to see so many of you attending today, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy our session today on banking in Bahrain, and more specifically, how Bahrain can serve you as an access to a $3.7 trillion market in the Middle East. Today's agenda is quite fruitful, and we have a great lineup of speakers. And you'll get to hear more from them on the actual local financial services landscape and the growth opportunities it actually holds. To those who are new to Bahrain's market, I just want to share with you a few statistics and key points to keep in mind during today's session. Firstly, Bahrain's financial services sector is very deep-rooted. We actually celebrated 100 years of banking, and we're home to many global firms such as Citibank, JP Morgan, Mastercard, all who are, by the way, joining us today at our panel. Today, the financial services sector contributes to 17% of our GDP, which is the largest non-oil contributor to our economy. We have also witnessed a significant transformation within the financial services sector, specifically in the banking industry, mainly due to innovation. So in 2017, the Central Bank of Bahrain have launched the first in the MENA onshore fintech regulatory sandbox. Soon after, the Central Bank of Bahrain have launched an open banking framework, as well as many initiatives such as the FinHub 973 and the Women in Fintech initiative that is led by the Supreme Council of Women. We also have joining us today, Yasmin Sharaf, who is a member of the FinTech unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain that will give you a good flavor on the different regulations to support innovation in the financial services sector. Now, last and not least, today Bahrain is an important strategic as well as business partner for the United States. This relationship was cemented by far-reaching free trade agreement that took place in 2006. It was actually the first GCC country to sign an FTA agreement with the United States. The US-Bahrain Free Trade Agreement facilitates commercial trade between both countries, providing a boost for American companies and Bahrain service providers seeking access to the US market. Just to give you a flavor of how beneficial and how successful this free trade agreement is, in 2018, we saw $1.2 billion in imports and $683 million in exports from this free trade agreement alone. In 2019, total trade between Bahrain and the United States was at $1.63 billion US dollars, and FDI from the US stood at more than $340 million US dollars. I'm not going to take much of your time as we have a great lineup of speakers, but before I end my remarks, I want to thank our partners from the US Chamber of Commerce and the US Bahrain Business Council who supported us in organizing this webinar. With that, I will hand over to our keynote speaker, Jennifer O'Meal, Executive Director of the US Chamber of Commerce, US Bahrain Business Council.
Thank you so much, Dalal. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone on the line here today. As Dalal mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of U.S. Chamber of Commerce's U.S. Bahrain Business Council. We were established in 2006 alongside the signing of the U.S.-Bahrain Free Trade Agreement. And the U.S.-Bahrain Business Council is the premier business advocacy organization dedicated to strengthening economic and commercial relationship between our two countries. And so the council is composed of both U.S. and Bahraini companies, and our main goal is to expand two-way trade and strengthen economic cooperation. So in that regard, I'd like to thank our co-chairs of the council, Amazon Web Services, West Point Home, Al Zayani Investments, and Medal Cables. So some of the main partners in the U.S.-Bahrain business relationship. The council is also honored to work with EDB and other institutions of the Bahraini and U.S. governments to serve as a close intermediary with our private sectors. For example, together with the EDB, we hosted His Royal Highness Crown Prince in Washington in 2017, where there were nearly $10 billion of deals signed between our two countries. So we're grateful for this long-term partnership. As Dalal had mentioned, our two-way trade in both goods and services now is about $4 billion. That's about $2.5 billion in goods and $1.5 billion in services. And we really think services like banking and financial services is where we can really grow, given Bahrain's small population, but mighty size, strategic location, and human capital. And Bahrain is, of course, one of the first financial hubs in the Middle East. That's where many U.S. companies have started to access the Gulf region. To this day, there's many U.S. companies still in Bahrain, international financial institutions that have rated Bahrain very high in terms of transparency and expertise. So with this history comes a lot of experience and expertise, and that's why we're delighted to be joined here today by this esteemed panel and really learn some of the new trends in the banking industry, specifically as Bahrain is right now at the vanguard of fintech. As the US-Bahrain Business Council, we stand ready to support US and Bahrain partnerships in the banking and fintech industry, and really looking forward to hearing more about what we can do together in today's discussion. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Edmund Christo. I'm the Banks and Insurance Analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. Today, I will give you an overview on the banking sector in the region, which will help you assess potential opportunity. Let's look at the first slide, please. Improving macroeconomic outlook supported by higher oil prices and vaccination rate are supportive to the Gulf banking sector. It's expected to improve credit demand and reduce risk on the bank's balance sheet from rising default in the corporate and retail exposure. Despite the pandemic and the decline in economic activities we have seen during the lockdown last year, credit growth across the region has been healthy, around 7%, with Saudi and Qatar banks contributing the most. You can see on the chart here that credit growth was higher even before the pandemic, but for the situation the banks been going through in terms of de-risking, risk appetite being low, 7% is considered to be a healthy growth compared to what we have seen in the European continent, for example. Momentum has been slow for the UAE banks, for example, 1% growth last year, and this is due to rising pressure on consumer and private sector. There have been some reduced appetite of lending for the UAE bank, and this is mainly because of residing risk on the real estate market. However, we see potential growth and better outlook for growth coming from Expo 2020 later the year, investment in digital economy. If we look at Qatar, for example, Qatari banks are expected to sustain strong growth momentum we've seen last year between 6 to 7% lending growth. Some of this credit will come ahead of the World Cup, and also the midterm growth is likely to come from increasing LNG production. Saudi Bank delivered the highest growth of 13% last year and also are expected to sustain similar momentum. The catalyst will be the Sharik program and also strong mortgage growth. We have seen 60% increase on mortgages last year. We expect 30 to 35% in the short term. Despite the challenging environment in Kuwait, growth was being sustained at 6%. And there is a strong pipeline of projects to be invested in an infrastructure project, mainly on the oil industry. Bahrain has seen similar trends, opportunity in the transportation sector, digital banking supported by friendly and enhanced regulatory framework, and the growing Islamic finance, especially on the retail space. Yet the growth across the whole region has been categorized by specific shift into low-risk credits. Shift away from high private sector risk and SMEs into public sector lending and collateralized lending into mortgages. This offers opportunity for alternative financing to close the gap, as bank risk appetite is likely to remain modest in the near term. Next slide, please. Banks have been de-risking since 2019. We saw acceleration in 2020 of de-risking. They preserve capital and reduce the level of provisioning they need to put on their balance sheet. This is likely to remain the case for this year and next year. We have seen deferment of credit loan in the region. And we have seen this program that was introduced last year to ease pressure on the banks and on the consumer to be extended. We've seen it extended across the whole region, UAE, Saudi, Kuwait, and Bahrain. If we look at the size of loan being deferred, for example, in the UAE, 16% of the loan book has been deferred on the deferral. In Saudi is around 8 to 9. In Kuwait, the entire retail loan book's being deferred. In Qatar is mid-single digits. So why this is important? The extension of the deferral reduces the risk on the bank's balance sheet because it gives more time for the consumer and corporate to improve their cash flow. And on the other hand, it will give flexibility for the bank to restructure loans. We still expect non-performing loan to increase by 2 to 3% across the GCC. Now, if we look at the resources available for the banks, banks have a strong capital ratios in this region, up to 18%, which if you compare it to international standard, it's a significant buffer. They have ample liquidity, especially domestic liquidity. LDR is still low. So they are in good position to lend and to grow once the economy recovers. Now, next slide. Here we are looking quickly at the revenue mix for banks across the whole region. And you will see that despite interest rate falling, low interest rate environment, revenue generated in the banking sector in the region is still depending on interest-sensitive products, lending and generating margin on this lending, which is impacted by low interest rate. Still, the revenue generated from interest-sensitive product is 73% of their total revenue. Banks has been for a while trying to shift their revenue mix into fee-based product. It has been difficult, but we see more focus into wealth management now and fee-generative digital services. However, what's interesting here is that the share of fee income from the total income has come down even before COVID. And I attribute the reason for this is the increased competition. We see it from alternative remittances and competitive pressure on lending-related fees. Next slide, please. As we discussed, margin fell 22 basis points for banks in 2020, despite cost of funding being at all-time low. If we look at the structure of the deposit, large part of the deposit is coming from CASA, which is cheap cost of funding. And this has grown during the pandemic because people and corporate are spending less. They are piling cash on their balance sheets. What does it mean also that there is a low share of saving product in the region? Profitability, as we measure it by ROE here, come under pressure for banks across the globe. And this region, we have feared the worst from the effect of low oil prices. However, oil prices are recovering, are on better level now, and that should be supportive to the outlook. But still, the provisioning last year as a percentage of total loan picked up to 130 basis points compared to 10-year average of 88 basis points, which impacted profitability. If we look at the next slide, which is ROE, you will see ROE for the banks in the region is 8%. Compared to 10-year average of 12%. Next slide. This takes me to my last point today, which is on cost and efficiency. Despite the strict cost control by banks last year, which resulted in some banks halting their investment strategy and investment spending on digitalization, a cost-to-income ratio still weakened due to significant pressure on revenue from falling interest rate and weak lending environment. However, we expect revenue to recover this year, but the recovery will remain weak because interest rate is first very low. Banks will continue, appetite will continue to remain modest. They are shifting into government lending, public sector lending, which come at a lower spread. And also competition among banks, especially on the corporate, is rising. And we see it on the retail with digitalization and the new product offering. So the solution will be for the bank is to improve operational efficiency. So to wrap up, Gulf banks are likely to be selective on financing, which offer opportunity for alternative finance solution to close the gap. Also, big data, AI analytics will be crucial to banks to price the risk and reward equation better. The low share of saving product we've seen offer opportunity for investment products. and investment platform where fintech can play an important role in this, as well as the focus on fee-based product and digital transaction, which will be on the agenda for the bank. We also see a focus on technology to improve back office efficiencies and transaction. This is all for me. If you have any question or you need to more details on our research, you can find it on Bloomberg under our platform, Bloomberg Intelligence. I will hand over to Yasmin for the panel discussion now.
Thank you, Edmond. Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. This is Yasmin Safar, and I'm part of the EDB, Manager in Financial Services and Business Development. Thank you. I wanted to first thank you, Delal, for working with our audience and providing us with the interesting facts. Also, thank you for Jennifer and Edmond for sharing with us your insights. I think us and the audience have found this quite fruitful. And just ahead of our next speaker's overview on the FS landscape, I wanted to kindly request the audience to spend a few seconds now to answer the poll question that you'll see appearing on the screen. Great. So I want to thank you in advance, everybody, for sharing your thoughts on the question, which will offer us, invaluable insights into sort of today's discussion as well. Please now join me in welcoming our panelists. Our first panelist is Yasmin Al-Sharaf, who's the head of the FinTech unit at the Central Bank of Bahrain. Our next person is Omar Kupti. He's Vice President and Head of Financial Institutions for Bahrain and Kuwait, but just bear with us, he's facing a bit of technical difficulties. We also have with us on the panel Sharif Abdessalam, Executive Director, Head of GCC and Turkey, FIG, Wholesale and Payments of JP Morgan. And last but not least, we have Pankaj Astana, who is Vice President, Digital Payments and Labs of the MENA from Mastercard. Welcome, everybody, and it's great to have you all with us here today. So maybe I'll dive straight into it and maybe start, posing questions to our panelists. Maybe I'll start with ladies first, Yasmin. You have the honors of starting this panel with me. Obviously, we've heard our previous panelists, speakers kind of talk about Bahrain and the central bank and the things that have been done. Could you and obviously, CBB has played a fundamental role in introducing some very key regulations and platforms for potential fintech companies to operate in Bahrain. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on that?
First of all, good evening, good afternoon to everyone joining us today, and a special thank you to the EDB for inviting us to be part of this panel. So Yasmin, just to start off with, I'd like to first give a little bit of context to the general overview of Bahrain's financial services sector landscape, and just to reiterate a few things that Dalal had already mentioned in her opening remarks. Bahrain boasts one of the oldest and most established financial services sectors within the region. It is the largest contributor to the oil and gas it's the largest contributor to the economy following oil and gas, which is valued actually at around 19% of real GDP towards the end of last year. We are also home to around 400 financial institutions, both local and international. And the Central Bank of Bahrain, as a single regulator of the financial services sector, we play an important role in leveraging the expertise that we've been able to gain in financial services over the past decades to build a regulatory environment that is conducive to supporting a thriving, progressive, and a future-proofing financial services sector. Since we embarked on our fintech journey a few years back by establishing a dedicated fintech and innovation unit, we've introduced a number of fintech initiatives, and we have been very successful in being able to build one of the most thriving and dynamic fintech sectors within the region, which is continuing to evolve. The CBB plays a role, I would say, under three main broad kind of initiatives. The first of which is in putting in place enabling regulations. The second of which is creating a regulatory testing environment to support innovation. And finally, in collaborating with other stakeholders, both within the private as well as the public sectors, both locally and internationally as well. If we go to the first initiative, which is ensuring that we have an enabling regulatory landscape, I would say, we at the Central Bank of Bahrain are continuously updating and revising our regulations. We're very flexible in introducing new regulations as well to be able to support and adapt to new emerging business models. Over the past few years, we have issued a number of different regulations to support more innovation and to foster the fintech sector within the Kingdom of Bahrain. We have been the first movers in issuing those regulations across the MENA region. Just to name a few, for instance, we've rolled out our open banking regulations, whereby we've mandated all retail banks within the Kingdom of Bahrain to be fully compliant. We're also accepting applications for third-party processors to be part of the wider open banking ecosystem in the country. We've issued crypto asset regulations, and currently we've got two licensees. One of them has actually started within our regulatory sandbox and has moved on to receiving a full license. We've issued robo-advisory regulations, crowdfunding regulations, alongside a host of other regulations as well, and we're continuing to modify and develop regulations as and when required. When it comes to the second role that the CBP plays in providing a testing environment, as Dalal mentioned, we in Bahrain, we've established the first onshore regulatory sandbox in the whole of the MENA region back in 2017, which provides startups, fintech companies, as well as existing banks and financial institutions to be able to test their innovative solutions in a controlled, safe environment under the supervision of the central bank. We've been so successful with the sandbox so far. We've received more than 100 applications from fintech startups from all around the world. So we've got companies all the way from San Francisco to other parts of the US, from Europe, from Asia, and from the region as well. We've recently enhanced the testing environment by launching the first digital platform to support further innovative testing in Bahrain, which is FinHub 973. Now, when it comes to the third initiative, or the third role that the CBP plays in supporting fintech initiatives within the kingdom, we collaborate and partner with stakeholders both locally and internationally. So we work alongside a lot of public and private sector players as well. We're a member of a number of international bodies and committees, for instance, the Global Financial Innovation Network, alongside a number of other international regulators, where we share experiences, we share our learning stories and learning journeys, and try to really work together on creating new initiatives that will support further cross-border financial services going forward as well.
Well, thank you so much, Yasmin, for the elaborate, introduction about Bahrain and the central bank. Obviously, there's been a lot going on there, and I think this transitions very nicely into our next, panelist, Sharif. If you can maybe, obviously, JP Morgan has been in Bahrain almost almost half a decade now, not half a decade, half a millennium. Anyways, almost 50 years. Do excuse, my high. And then, obviously, in your experience, can you maybe elaborate a little bit on, how being operational out of Bahrain has supported, JP Morgan's regional businesses and business here as well? I think that would be very interesting for us and the audience to hear.
Sure, and thank you, Yasmin. Just first of all, I'm delighted to be here, and thanks to the EDB for arranging this event. Just to share some context and some background for you, JP Morgan today is the result of a number of heritage global banks that each had a presence in Bahrain since the early 1970s and came together over time. These were Chase Manhattan Bank, Chemical Bank, manufacturers Hanover and Fleming Asset Management. At least these are the ones I can remember. There are many for JP Morgan. But this was at a time when Bahrain really emerged itself as a financial hub in the Middle East and continues to be so today. And this was also before the establishment of, or the building of the Saudi Arabia Causeway, linking the two countries. So it was really Bahrain standing on its own merits. So each heritage institution saw value in operating from Bahrain, and over time these banks merged and created the organization that you see today, which is one of significant scale. It allowed us now to operate effectively in the region where we've built very deep-rooted relationships. But just taking a step back and just giving a bit more context on this, it's very important when you're established in any country to have comfort in the country's dynamics, a sophisticated and mature regulatory framework, and working with an established and experienced central bank. These remain paramount, and we see this, of course, very well established in Bahrain. In addition, there are many positive factors to the country that it brings, and it allows us to continue operating as the SEMIA hub out of Bahrain for the transaction banking business, and a very close network of internal stakeholders within the bank coming through the Bahrain office to connect within the region. First of all, Bahrain is very well centrally located time-wise in terms of connectivity. It's a very good bridge between the Middle East and Asia, the Middle East and Europe, and also the Western Hemisphere as well. Of course, the causeway that I mentioned earlier, linking Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, really brings very strong business connectivity between the two countries. Traditionally, there's been very, very good flight connections between Bahrain and the GCC. We just opened, as you know, the new airport, which is very, very impressive. But the legacy airport as well was one that was extremely business friendly. And we have really great local talent in the country, both locals and expats as well. And as many might know, Bahrain has been a home for expats for decades, and it's a very open society as well. I mean, I personally myself have lived in the country for 16 years, and I was only supposed to be here for 2. And last but not least, on this question, Yasmin, the diversity agenda is really well embraced here in Bahrain. You see it with the likes of the CEB, Yasmin on the line, EDB, yourselves, and the rest of the team there, and many organizations within Bahrain really promoting the women in the workplace agenda, which is very much in line with the JP Morgan ethos and our way of doing business.
Well, great. Thank you, Sharif. Thank you for that overview. And I completely agree with you. And it's it's always great to see, both of us kind of all on this panel today to represent, the culture here. Maybe Pankaj, I'll turn towards you. I think, we've had a very good kind of insights into the innovation aspect from a regulatory perspective, obviously, with a JP Morgan, a fully established entity and bank globally. Maybe from a Mastercard's perspective, with the ongoing digital transformation of the regional economies and the effects, obviously, of COVID-19, what has Mastercard's experience been with e-commerce trading partners in the region? If you can maybe share a bit of kind of that, and maybe also some context into terms of Mastercard's presence here as well.
Thanks, Yasmin, and really delighted to be here. Thank you, EDB and the US Chamber of Commerce. So yes, last year has been phenomenal. It's been a bit of a jolt. I think very well accepted facts are that it has accelerated the trends that we were already expecting. But I will share some interesting data points on what exactly has been the impact and the surge. So first, I think, as everyone is aware, e-commerce did pick up substantially. A very interesting data point there is that almost all of the substantial growth in e-commerce has come out of mobile devices. So people, you're actually seeing people take a quantum jump, not going to the computer and going straight for the devices. And we're already seeing a big surge of payments through wearables. And I think it's just a matter of time where voice commerce and others picks up. So one very major advantage that Bahrain and the larger GCC region had was their investments in the digital infrastructure, which, the country as well as the region boasts some of the most superior connectivity infrastructure worldwide. And that has really helped the region tide through the e-commerce, through the COVID crisis quite well. And e-commerce has really been a beneficiary. If I were to share some data points, I can tell you that Mastercard Economic Unit did a survey, and we found that 64% of the respondents have embraced online banking, which is up, from baselines of around 30% earlier. Close to 70% of e-commerce users were using their devices and other means of e-commerce payments for top-ups. 63% were actually buying retail clothing. Almost half of them were buying groceries. So we really believe that grocery as a segment continues to have big potential for further growth. And I'll link this up to small and medium enterprises in a bit. Healthcare was another beneficiary. We've seen about 56% of usage on healthcare. And one very interesting thing that we sort of realized in this process was also there was a surge in fraudulent attacks. People did try to, in last year in e-commerce, try to attack. And I think one credit that would go to the regulators and to the banking fraternity who have worked very closely with us is that they had made timely investments in risk management solutions. So while the number of fraud attempts definitely increased, but the actual fraud losses have been very well managed last year. And that has been a major boost for e-commerce confidence. So I would say that, when we think about e-commerce, there have been two major trends. Device-based commerce and a quantum jump in user behavior is now here to stay. Second, investments in risk management and fraud pragmatically, embracing what is happening in the future. I think the region has done it very well. And we need to continue on that journey. And two major investments there are in a solution called tokenization, which the region has adopted, which has been really helpful in managing e-commerce fraud. So tokenization as a technology is able to manage approval rates. So if you think about the payments business, it's made of two components. It is made of letting all genuine transactions pass through while keeping frauds to zero. So it's a balance between approval rates and fraud rates. And in e-commerce, we are seeing that, with tokenization, we are able to run close to 100% approval rates with almost 0% fraud rate. So that's a very major technology change. So user behavior and the coming of tokenization have been major trends. And coming to the role of the Bahraini, environment and the ecosystem, it has been amazing. We have worked very closely with the Economic Development Board and the central bank, and they have been very progressive. As a global company, we find Bahrain very welcoming of innovation and new ideas. And we're talking at a multi-rail level. So even when we think beyond e-commerce, with their open banking regulations and their forward-looking thinking on fintechs, I think the country is becoming very exciting for fintech and payment innovation. And Mastercard is delighted to be partnering with them.
Well, thank you, Pankaj, for all of that. And I second that, being part of this whole journey in Bahrain. It's very exciting times. Maybe we'll move over. Omar, can you hear us?
Hi, Yasmin.
Omar?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Great we managed to have you here with us today. And maybe I'll direct the question, if you're ready, towards you. And I think it's a very excellent transition. I think we were discussing innovations with Mastercard and how our things are doing. It would be great to understand from Citibank's perspective, what are the plans for innovation, and how what are you currently doing, and how does that tie in with the region?
Sure. Thank you, Yasmin, and thanks for the EDB and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce for organizing this. And apologies if you can't see me on camera. I'm facing some technical issues. But look, from Citi's perspective, and in the last decade, finance and banking in particular has been seen as one of the industries that is most vulnerable for disruption. There were some speculations that fintechs will kill traditional banking. But as we stand here today, I think the consensus has shifted. It has emerged that this new world of technology in finance is all about adding to the existing financial system. So not replacing or disrupting, it is simply supplementing it. So we at banks want fintechs to rise and succeed. We believe the scalability of banks combined with the agility of fintechs has the potential to transform the banking industry and make banking as a service accessible to every person on this planet. Now, as one of the largest financial institutions, we at Citi believe that it is essential to keep on top of this new wave in the world of finance. And we understand and adapt to these changing times. Having said that, we have several initiatives to launch, and we've launched several successful innovative products that have redefined client experience. Now, one of these products ties in with the region. It happened in July 2019 when Citi Innovation Lab in Dublin, through direct collaboration with clients and in partnership with a leader in artificial intelligence, launched what we call Citi Payment Outlier Detection in 90 countries. The solution really used advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning to help proactively identify outlier payments that do not conform to clients' past patterns of payment activity. Now, we understand that banks need fintechs and fintechs need banks. So few years ago, I think it was 2019, we launched a fintech challenge around the world. It was launched in New York, in India, in Singapore, and in Dubai, with an intention of identifying potential synergies that could transform the transaction banking landscape. The FinTech Challenge held in Dubai in 2019 had at least 2 participants from Bahrain who were among the first batch of shortlisted candidates. Now, the FinTech market in the Middle East region is predicted to enter a new era of growth. It's really fueled by government support, a large accelerator ecosystem, and a pool of venture capital firms that are shaping the future of financial services in the region and beyond. So really, we are working hand in hand with FinTech and continue to look for innovative ways to serve our customers.
Well, thank you, Omar. And I mean, I think it's always music to, fintechs and banks' ears, like to, this is a more of a collaborative approach that we kind of need to move into. And I think this is, it's great because, obviously our central bank has launched their own initiative, and I think it was mentioned earlier. Maybe Yasmin, can you elaborate a little further on the fintech, relationship, like the relationship with Fintech Galaxy and, FinHub 973?
Sure. As I briefly mentioned earlier, Yasmin, FinHub 973 was one of the most recent developments to the fintech ecosystem locally in Bahrain. And just like Omar mentioned a while ago, there are huge synergies and collaboration between traditional banks, financial institutions, and fintechs on the other hand. And FinHub 973 supports exactly that, the ability for bringing together financial institutions and banks within the Kingdom of Bahrain with international fintechs and providing them a chance to collaborate, partner on developing new solutions, showcasing new prototypes, etc. So FinHub 973 is the first virtual innovation platform to be rolled out in the region, which is supported by a central bank. It was launched by the Central Bank of Bahrain in partnership with Fintech Galaxy, who are our technical partners. And it operates using the cloud-based infrastructure of Fintech Galaxy, which is named Phoenix 22. We have also engaged with our local banks and financial institutions to join the platform and to join us as strategic partners. So they will have a huge say in the way that the platform is going to evolve in the future, adding features that work to their specific needs and requirements as well. So what exactly is the concept behind FinHub 973? This platform really supports the digital transformation journeys of financial institutions and banks by giving them access to a local virtual AI-driven fintech marketplace, whereby we've got fintechs from around the world joining the platform and giving them access to more than 300 APIs, providing them with different use cases alongside a host of synthetic data, allowing those banks and fintechs to come together, roll out hackathons, challenges, build prototypes, MVPs, and really work together to enhancing the digital transformation within the wider financial services sector as well. There are huge opportunities for both financial institutions from one end and to the fintechs from another end as well. As I mentioned, fintechs from around the world are welcome to join FinHub 973 and to be part of the fintech marketplace on the platform. They'll be able to showcase, they'll have a chance to showcase their solutions to local banks, financial institutions. They'll have a chance to interact with the regulator and to also apply to the regulatory sandbox in a more streamlined manner than the usual traditional sandbox application process. Additionally, those fintechs will also have a chance to get access to funding before going to the market. We are having plans to start inviting VCs to join the platform as the second phase. And it's really our intention to try and really create a virtual representation of the whole fintech ecosystem on a single platform to act as the single-stop shop for the fintech sector within Bahrain. And just speaking of that, since we've launched the platform back in October of 2020, we've up to date, we have more than 1,000 fintechs from around the world who are listed onto FinHub 973. And they've really chosen Bahrain as the jurisdiction of their headquarters, and from which they can utilize Bahrain as a test bed and to scale their operations to the wider GCC, to the wider GCC and the MENA region as well, which is growing extremely fast at a rate of around $1.5 trillion. So I would say FinHub 973 is a win-win to both when it comes to fintechs as well as to traditional banks and financial institutions as well.
Well, thank you, Yasmin, for that. Just before I move to the next panel, may I remind the audience that if they want to kind of direct any questions, there's a Q&A kind of chat, and we can sort of look into those after we wrap up the panel. Maybe my next question would be to actually Pankaj. Obviously FinHub 973 and Bahrain has been doing quite interesting things. It would be interesting to understand from Mastercard's perspective, sort of the recent activities that has taken place on your region's first tap on phone agreement with Qiddiya. I think it will be interesting for the audience to hear about that in terms of your regional work.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting journey at Mastercard. So it all started a few years back when our ex-CEO, Mr. Ajay Banga, chalked out this vision that we want to reach out to 1 billion users and get them into the digital payments fold. And that sort of set off the domino to start problem solving. In fact, one of our latest announcements has been that we have committed, recently committed $250 million over the next 5 years to help small businesses succeed. And it really comes down to this. Like we were just mentioning on e-commerce as well. The biggest business sector that has been impacted by COVID has been the small businesses. And the reason for that was that they typically depended on just doing transactions in store. So there is, our investments and our commitment is actually to help businesses be viable. And a very important part for small businesses to be viable is to go omni-channel. Now, as they go on the journey for omni-channel, we also realize that even the traditional acceptance has to become more viable. And when we thought about how we can solve for that, one of the ideas that we had really been working on was how do we get the cost of infrastructure down? And that's where the mobile phone as a point of acceptance started becoming very exciting. And as this region grows with contactless payment acceptance, we looked at the mobile phone itself being the merchant's method to collect payments from customers. So the customer can tap a plastic card on your mobile phone and collect funds. And as we looked at going out for these new these new solutions, we realized the importance of fintechs. And fintechs are extremely important in this journey to reach out to small businesses. And GDIA, as one of the largest fintechs in the region and the largest in KSA by far, in a market which has 70% smartphone penetration and almost 300,000 SMEs, out to reach to. So it was a no-brainer for us. We sort of partnered with them. And our goal is to make sure that small businesses are able to accept payments in all methods, including card present, where this particular partnership will enable close to 300,000 businesses to sort of just use their mobile phones to start collecting payments. And we are very, very excited about this. And it's more of a start, as we definitely see the role of more fintechs coming into the fold and supporting small businesses.
Well, thank you. And I guess, us being just a very quick drive from Saudi is always exciting. Maybe Sharif, maybe we can move on to you. Obviously JP Morgan has been involved in a number of different projects in the region. And in terms of the Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia and others, could you maybe shed some light on that and share with us?
Sure, great question, Yasmin. Thank you. So whilst I can't specifically comment about the mega projects that we're currently involved in, generally we're very active and enjoy very strong ties with the GREs, financial institutions, and the sovereigns in the region. There are, however, some publicly announced deals that were successfully completed by us. For example, there was the Noga Holding bond issuance, the Alba Line 6 financing, and in Saudi Arabia, JP Morgan was one of the international advisors for the Aramco listing as well. So a lot of activity happening in the region and more to come in this space as well. So we're fortunate to be operating in a region that has great prospects. In particular for the banks, there is the prospect of financing public entities and private companies as well. We're very active in M&A advisory for the consolidation that's happening in the region. As you know, we're an overbanked region, so there's an expectation that more consolidation will take place. And of course, the day-to-day transaction banking needs, which is the lifeblood of all financial institutions in the region, is a continuous effort and an area that we really focus on. You touched on Vision 2030. As you know, this week, the Kingdom marked its 5th year anniversary of the announcement, and it's a strategic framework to reduce the dependency on oil and diversify the economy in various areas. Many banks have the expertise in these areas, and there's also focus on privatization. So there's also another advisory opportunity there for financial institutions to really get involved in. So overall, a lot of activity. We're very optimistic about the region and fortunate to be here as well.
Thank you, Sharif. Thank you for that insight. I think it's just exciting times across the board. There's so many changes happening. Omar, maybe you can, I think you're there, right? My question to you would be on, a couple of years ago, Citi has moved to, the regional call center to Bahrain. Can you discuss why the center was moved and, what were the benefits that Citibank had experienced due to that decision?
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin. That's right. If I recall correctly, I think this was moved to Bahrain in July 2015.
Yes.
Look, we've been in Bahrain for more than 50 years, and Bahrain is an important market for Citi. Hello?
We can hear you. We can hear you, Omar.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. And Bahrain is an important market for Citi. And we are highly committed to the franchise and continue to invest in the business. Apart from the call center, which I will come back to shortly, it's worth noting that we've been housing many of Citi's regional operations for several decades in Bahrain. We have our Islamic banking business with its global headquarters based in Bahrain. We also manage treasury operations and financial institutions, customer service units for 10 countries in the MENA region, out of Bahrain. So it's really a sizable operation we have here. Now, let me go back to the call center, or what we call city phone banking. So the call center serves around 360,000 retail clients in Bahrain and UAE. It started with 44 officers and currently has 75 employees, 70% of which being Bahraini nationals. Bahrain was an ideal destination for Citi to move this call center for several reasons, and I would say all are equally important. The first reason really being the broad and advanced economic and regulatory framework we have in Bahrain. And this is really in line with international standards, along with the infrastructure setup that is in place. It helps business to start and operate smoothly under clear guidelines. The second reason is that there's a large base of talent who are multilingual and have strong communication skills, as well as sound banking knowledge. This is really driven by the quality of education here in Bahrain. And the third reason, which is also a very important reason, is Tamkeen. So Tamkeen is a governmental agency that provides supports and assistance to private sector business, aiming towards developing the private sector contribution in the economy. Our partnership with Tamkeen was key for us to find the support and local talent. I believe that these are the three main reasons that made it an easy decision for us to move the call center back in 2015.
Great, thanks Omar for that. Thank you, and thank you to all our panelists. So I think we're unfortunately running out of time. And we would have loved to take on, the questions that we are getting, but, we are happy to respond to these via email if they haven't, if we're not able to address them on our call today or on today's webinar. And I really wanted to thank every single person that has participated in this panel, and, Yasmin, Pankaj, Omar, and Sharif, thank you so much for your valuable insights. And maybe just to sort of, to close off, did you have any closing remarks from your end, or like any parting messages, or any of the speakers?
I think, if you allow me, Yasmin, I think that now more than any time, especially after the pandemic, COVID-19, that has really put innovation and digitization at the forefront, and it's no longer a choice, it's a necessity. And in order for any financial services sector to remain progressive, digitization has to be at the very core of that sector. And I just wanted to say here that as the sole regulator of the financial services sector in Bahrain, we are very supportive of digitalization. We're very flexible when it comes to welcoming new innovative solutions from fintech startups, from Bahrain, from anywhere based out of the world, internationally. And we really want to call upon international fintechs as well to explore the opportunities in Bahrain, to approach us at the central bank, and to really try and use Bahrain as the test bed for their solutions and as their main headquarters, from which then they can expand to the wider GCC and MENA region as well.
Well, thank you, Yasmin, for that. Thank you. And I completely agree. Obviously, we are poised to kind of, welcome potential investors. And, obviously, you've seen from our panelists, some of the, big corporates that have also chosen Bahrain as their bases. And, as Bahrain, the EDB, we operate as a one-stop shop for all investors. We help companies, understand the opportunities available and how they can benefit from our growing FS market, and use Bahrain as a launch pad into the rest of the region as well. We are, I think, coming towards an end to it, so I'll thank my panelists. Thank you so much for your time. And we are happy to reach out to my colleague, Patrick Dine, whose contact information is going to be displayed on the screen to discuss any investments or expansion opportunities. Thank you all our speakers and audience. Thank you for the US Chamber. Thank you for all our panelists, for Edmund from Bloomberg as well. And I wish everybody to have a good day and I guess our folks here have a good evening as well.